back to history class. As we enter World War II, our focus right now is on the American perspective leading up. As you well know, America was in a Great Depression at the time. Its leaders, as we know now from historical documents that have been released and declassified and made available to the public, that was not available when I went to school in the 80s, we know that the American government, very wary of another war, well understood to get plans ready to go to mobilize since 1939. America's might and its ability to quickly retool for war was simply based on excellent mobilization plans. That does not mean they're going to win battles right away. Matter of fact, they're going to fail mightily. Pearl Harbor, Kasserine Pass, to name a few. But the important thing is that America is on a war footing. Its government is ready to go. Its people are still isolationist. But they are preparing for war for almost the first time in its history instead of going to war and not being ready. One of the big authors is Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. You'll never hear his name. You never hear him. Because why? He was involved in mobilization. He was getting the plans together. He was superior in his ability to make this, to put all this together and make it happen, along with elements of civilian war production boards that President Roosevelt at the time had gotten together. One of the critical things was, if a fight came, where should America fight? This is known as the Plan Dog Memo. Plan Dog Memo is what I'm going to read to you. It is an essential piece of information. It was declassified many, many years later. Thus you see that on your handout, or the handout you're seeing online, it says secret wiped out and a new classification. We will study many, many documents that have become unclassified during the Cold War, as well as up to now, those that are made available to the public through the Freedom of Information Act. You need to know what your government does. So this is very important to see. What were the military leaders thinking in the United States a year before war came? This one is from the Navy Department, and it becomes the source document for Roosevelt to decide Germany first, War Plan Black, over Japan first, War Plan Orange. Now, the Navy Department, Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, Washington. Plan Dog Memo extract, November 12th, 1940. Memorandum for the Secretary. Referring to my very brief touch in a recent conference as to the desirability of obtaining at least some light upon the major decisions which the President Roosevelt, may make for guiding our future naval effort in the event of war, and in further immediate preparation for war, you may recall my remarks the evening we discussed war plans for the Navy. I stated then that if Britain wins decisively against Germany, we could win everywhere. But if she loses, the problem confronting us would be very great. And while we might not lose everywhere, we might possibly not win anywhere. As I stated last winter on the Hill, Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. in front of Congress, in these circumstances, we would be set back upon our haunches. Haunches means on our rear ends. Our war effort, instead of being widespread, would then have to be confined to the Western Hemisphere, Europe. I now wish to expand my remarks and to present to you my views concerning steps we might take to meet the situation that will exist should the United States enter war either alone or with allies. In this presentation, I have endeavored to keep in view the political realities in our own country. And what he's saying is the country still does not want to go to war. It's completely isolationist. It doesn't want a strong military. That's what he's saying. Okay, back to Plan Dog. The first thing to consider is how and where we might become involved. The immediate war alternatives seem to be A, war with Japan in which we have no allies. This might be precipitated by a Japanese armed opposition should we strongly reinforce our Asiatic fleet in Hawaii, or the Philippines garrison under General MacArthur. Should we start fortifying Guam, or should we impose additional important economic sanctions, which they end up doing? Or it might be precipitated by ourselves in case of overt Japanese action against us, or by further extension of Japanese hegemony. Hegemony means Japanese control over a regional area. We will discuss Japanese idea, imperial Japanese ideas of how they wanted to control the world later. B, war with Japan in which we have the British Empire or the British Empire and the Netherlands East Indies as allies. Note, the British Empire included Canada and Australia. Canada and Australia as well as New Zealand. So these aren't just small, this is not just the British Isles he's referring to. The British Empire includes not only those two empires, but also India. Indian armed forces played a huge role in World War II that fought on the British side. Now, this might be precipitated by one of the causes mentioned in A, by our movement of a naval reinforcement to Singapore, or by a Japanese attack on British or Netherlands territory. So, war with Japan, which we have no allies. War with Japan, in which we have the British Empire and the Netherlands East Indies. Those are the first two options. Option C, war with Japan, in which she is aided by Germany and Italy, and in which we are or not aided by allies. C is what actually happens in World War II. To the cause of such a war, previously listed, might be added augmented American material assistance to Great Britain, our active military intervention in Britain's favor, or our active resistance to German extension of military activities to the Western Hemisphere. D, war with Germany and Italy, in which Japan would not be initially involved, and which we would be allied with the British. Such a war would be initiated by American decision to intervene for the purpose of preventing the disruption of the British Empire, or German capture of the British Isles. E, we should also consider the alternative of now remaining out of the war and devoting ourselves exclusively to building up our defense or the Western Hemisphere, plus the preservation by means, peaceful means, of our Far Eastern interests, and plus also continued material assistance to Great Britain. So 5 options, and C actually is what happens. Japan is aided by Germany and Italy. Back to the memo. As I see it, our major national objectives in the immediate future might be stated as preservation of the territorial, economic, and ideological integrity of the United States, plus that of the remainder of the Western Hemisphere. Ideological integrity means the idea of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. He is saying we stand for the Founding Fathers and we're going to have to fight for that in some way. Also, the prevention of the disruption of the British Empire, with all that such a consummation implies, and the diminution of the offensive military power of Japan, with a view to the retention of our economic and political interests in the Far East. It is doubtful, however, that it would be in our interest to reduce Japan to the status of an inferior military and economic power. Later, after they defeat Japan, they go back to that. They don't want to see Japan as a small nation. They want to see it as a strong democratic nation. And we're going to talk about how both Germany and Japan are rebuilt later after the war. And it's the American idea of democracy and the Bill of Rights, all those things that we have that we enable into Japan and Germany. Now, a balance of power in the Far East is to our interests as much as is a balance of power in Europe. The question that confronts me are concerned with the preparation and distribution of the naval forces of the United States in cooperation with its military forces for use in war and the accomplishment of all or part of these national objectives. Let me review that. The national objectives. As you recall, you got to have doctrine. After doctrine becomes what? Think about everything like a strategy. So we're talking military strategy related to the doctrine that the nation should have. Right now, the doctrine is isolationist, but their national objectives, keeping the integrity of the country, its ideological integrity, the idea of what the founding fathers said, that all men are created equal, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, those essential things. Remember, the foundation document is not the Constitution. The Constitution is the governmental framework. The foundation document that sits on Liberty's hands as a foundation stone is the Declaration of Independence. That's what this admiral is saying. You see, he's not talking ships here. He's talking the most important big objectives, which is our national ideological integrity. So know that when senior leaders talk, they should be reflecting on who we really are and what was set long ago and why that is important. If we don't have that, then what are we going to war for? This admiral clearly understands it. Eventually, Germany first strategy. War Plan Black is developed. War Plan Orange is also developed. The decisive operation will be Germany first. The shaping operation will be Japan. They will fight both at the same time, but the assets will go towards Germany. And that is the value of understanding Plan DOG and the concerns. We'll see you on the high ground.